Welcome to Only For Your Ears and today's episode. But before we begin, I'd like to give thanks to people that have liked, shared, and subscribed. This is very much appreciated. Now for today's episode 49A, The Traveling Companion by Hans Christian Andersen, which I've renamed as Blessings From A Spirt Guide. The structure will remain the same, starting off with a summary where I'll give highlighted sentences on the most important points and give a reflection. Then we'll move on to my critical review on how this fairy tale plays in today's society by using an example of a recent film to give parallels. Then we'll move on to the trigger points. Some may be negative, some may be positive. And then I'll close with my famous quote and then close. So let's start off with The Traveling Companion, or Blessings From A Spirt Guide, is a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen that tells the story of a young man named John who sets out on a journey after the death of his elderly father. I digress. This is the perfect thing to do, in my opinion, after a death of a loved one. It helps you distance yourself from such an emotional, close time. John is kind-hearted and helps a dead man by paying for his proper burial. I digress. The universe always blesses such selfless acts of kindness and generosity, even though he is left with very little money. The sacrifice he made. Reflection, the importance of kindness and gratitude. The protagonist, John, is a compassionate and good-hearted character who helps others in need. I digress. The most important part of his quality is his sincerity. He doesn't have contrived reasoning for his gestures. This attributes to him the support of the mysterious traveling companion, who ultimately guides him through various trials. I digress. Hence, the mysterious man is impressed by his sincerity and is committed as acting as a guide. The story emphasizes the significance of kindness and gratitude, demonstrating that such virtues can lead to unexpected rewards and assistance. I digress. The universe always praises genuine acts of kindness. As John continues his journey, he meets a mysterious stranger who becomes his traveling companion. I digress. This sounds like a person sent as a blessing from the heavens. This man possesses magical powers and helps John in various situations through their travels. I digress. A protective angel has come into the young man's life. One day, they come across a kingdom where the king has offered his daughter's hand in marriage to the man who can pass 3 difficult tests. I digress. These tests are well beyond this young man's capacity. However, if a suitor fails any of the tests, he will face execution. I digress. The typical harsh penalties in a fairy tale that never really happens. His friend is going to bring his magic to save this young man. Reflection, friendship. The relationship between John and his traveling companion is a central theme in the story, highlighting the importance of friendship and loyalty. I digress. This friendship was birthed of non-conditional gift of kindness, persuading the man to follow the young man's example. The traveling companion's unwavering support and guidance are crucial to John's success, illustrating the value of true friendship in times of adversity. John falls in love with the princess and decides to take on the challenges. I digress. The young man feels he needs to prove his worth, which is unfortunate. The poor always need to show they are of value. With the help of this traveling companion, for each test, the companion uses his magical abilities to guide and protect John. The first challenge involves guessing the princess's thoughts. I digress. How difficult is it to read someone's mind you barely know? The second requires finding the princess among several identical women. And the third involves choosing the princess' favorite pet amongst a group of identical animals. My goodness. I digress. These tests are all created to recognize the prince's special qualities, not to see the young man's capacities. Thank goodness. Reflection. The rewards of virtue. Throughout the story, John's virtuous character, humility, and good deeds are consistently rewarded. This theme suggests that living a life of virtue and kindness will ultimately result in positive outcomes and blessings. I digress. His virtue leads him to falling in love with a beautiful princess. With his companion's assistance, John successfully passes all three tests, and the king grants him permission to marry the princess. Before the wedding, the traveling companion reveals to him as the spirit of the dead man whom John had helped at the beginning of the journey. Having returned the favor, the spirit can now rest in peace. I digress. What a wonderful return of gesture to the young man's blessing. Reflection, overcoming obstacles and personal growth. John's journey is filled with trials and challenges that must have overcome both physical and emotional. These experiences contribute to his personal growth and demonstrate his character, reinforcing the idea that facing adversity can lead to growth and self-discovery. I digress. His virtues gave him the strength of character to face each challenge with the ability to prevail. The story concludes with John marrying the princess and living happily ever after. The traveling companion highlights themes such as friendship, loyalty, kindness, and rewards of virtuous behavior, emphasizing the importance of helping others and unexpected blessings that can result from such actions. I digress, but of course, which is what I had mentioned from the very beginning of the fairy tale. The power of wisdom cannot be underestimated. Throughout this story, the traveler demonstrates resourcefulness and a deep understanding of human nature. These qualities enable him to guide John through difficult situations, highlighting the importance of wisdom and resourcefulness in navigating life's challenges. I digress. Although the spirit helped him, the man had his resourcefulness within him. That's why he received the reciprocal help. He had those resources within him, but the spirit guide was there to help him pull it out. That's what I believe. What a great story. My critical review on how this fairy tale plays in today's society. This fairy tale is a clear example of a genuine random act of kindness executed by a young man after overseeing the death and burial of his father, and without any hidden motives, which is refreshing in today's society. He gives an unknown elderly man the same respect. Even back in the day when this tale was written, this action would have been met with a sense of curious surprise. However, the dead man's spirit reaches out and befriends the sincere man with the magic of his life's wisdom and loyal friendship. This reminds me of times when I have experienced doing something I considered small, even though it was a kind gesture and received a much needed blessing just at the right time. God universe sees the pure intention of our hearts and blesses us based on that. I have friends who have intentionally gone out of their way to do something with hidden motives and said they still get blessed anyway. And of course, that's true in this day and age of hyper manifestation techniques where people deliberately conjure up ways to get their miracles. But somehow, this preconceived action, although viable, is missing the magic of the unseen forces creating the perfect elixir for the events and blessings to appear. Well, the story gets better. With the dead man acting as the young man's spirit guide, oversees great protection and blessings that come straight from his heart. The young man receives never-ending love from a blessed union with the princess. Let's move on to a movie that I think is a recent movie that just depicts some parallels to this particular story. I'll read the digress first. Hence, the mysterious man is impressed by his sincerity and is committed to acting as a guide. The story emphasizes the significance of kindness and gratitude, demonstrating that such virtues can lead to unexpected rewards and assistance. I digress. The universe always praises genuine acts of kindness. Ruby Bridges tells of the story of how a 6-year-old Black girl integrated a New Orleans segregated school in 1960s. I digress. This reminds me of when I went to school in London and I was around 5 or 6 and I was the only Black child in that school. I doubt if I was exposed to any of the intimidating acts that was bestowed upon her. Ruby didn't achieve this feat alone. There was a National Association of Advancement for Colored People that chose her. 4 U.S. Marshals who kept back the angry mob of haters bent on lynching her. Barbara Henry, a kind-hearted white woman teacher who pushed back against her racist superiors and co-workers. Robert Coles, a famous psychiatrist to help her with the stress, and his wife, Jane, and most of all, her courageous mother, who shared the deep faith that gave the girl the strength to persist in spite of the hatred around her, and of her father, who initially doubted that his daughter should bear being persecuted by segregationists. I digress. All these people who protected Ruby are the human spirits, pardon me, are the human spirits that the young man had in the fairy tale. Ruby's courage to endure the ugliness was rewarded and blessed. The spiritual blessings, I believe, that took place, the unforeseen forces brought the abundance for the people who adhered to the laws that had been put in place by President Kennedy in the 1960s, were the backbone of why Ruby was able to remain in school and ultimately graduate. Now for the trigger points. The trigger points are the bits that really affected me. And it's about receiving blessings and getting the spirit guide. There are 2 trigger points that pushed a reaction in me. First, one is the genuine sincerity from the young man's heart. This reminds me of when I arrived in Barcelona after living in Canada for 14 months. I had left the metro and went up the escalator when my suitcases fell down the stairs as I slipped backwards too. Well, a Moroccan man who was very nice helped me to stand up and put my bags in order and called a taxi for me. But before I left the metro, he gave me a mobile phone that didn't belong to me. I got gifted two, and in this situation, what happened is that I got this phone and it didn't belong to me. And I felt, what am I going to do with it? It's not my responsibility. Well, it's my responsibility to make sure it goes back to the person. But how am I going to do that? I didn't know who it belonged to because everything happened so fast. Anyway, I arrived at the hostel that I was supposed to be staying at. And within 5 minutes, I got a phone call. And it was the woman. She says, my phone. I said, yes, I have your phone. And I gave her the address of where I was staying. And she came over and she goes, oh my God, thank you so much. I'm so happy to get my phone back. And I can imagine how happy she must have been because all of our personal information is on the phone. So I forgot about it and, just said, I'm so glad that I gave the phone back and that this woman's happy. And that was the end of it. I didn't think about it again. Let's say about almost a year later, I'm sitting in church and one of the pastors gives this experience about this woman who, one of the parishioners, people that he works with, that she's really sincere woman. And she found this phone and she called the last name on the phone and she called the person and it was her phone. She says, I found your phone. And so she came and she gave it back. And so what she did was she recorded it, the whole situation, and put it on the YouTube shorts, those 15-minute YouTube scenes. And she got 800 or to 1,000 views. And I was sitting there and I was thinking, something, maybe I should have done that, but I didn't do it. I didn't think of it at the time. I just gave back the woman her phone. So that was her blessing. Or what came after I heard this particular testimony was that my phone had been stolen. It was stolen about 2 weeks later. Somebody went into my room at the Sabelgas where I'm staying because I'm homeless at the moment and I'm staying in a woman's shelter. And so this woman went in, took my phone and just took it. And I was really upset. And it had all my personal information on, just like it has everybody's personal information on the phone. And I was wondering how on earth was I going to afford a phone? I wasn't getting any money for anything. And so I spoke, I told a couple of people and they said, one of them said, I have a phone. It's an iPhone 11. It's a really good phone. And we don't use it. I got myself another phone and you could have that phone. So I said, oh, thank you so much. But I didn't stop it there. I spoke to somebody else and they said, my husband has an old iPhone. It's an SE. It's not as nice as the i11, which I didn't know it was going to be an i11 until he gave it to me. But it's a small phone. You could use that. And so it was just so amazing. It's so helpful. And then what ended up happening is that I ended up having two really good Apple phones. I've always had Samsung. I have these two Apple phones that if something happens to one, I have another one. And what was interesting, a couple of months before, somebody gave me these special earphones, especially used for iPhones. I said, well, I don't have an iPhone. I won't need it. But of course, little did I know the universe is putting the motion and the beauty and the miracles and the action in place to when I'd be able to use this particular gadget properly. So that's my trigger. and my little story and my blessings in disguise too. And so we'll end for today. And I'll end with my quote, like, healing is a lifelong blessing, lesson, and gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Healing is a lifelong lesson, blessing, and gift we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Goodbye, and thank you.